Hello, Shana Tova, Gutta Kvittel. It should be good. A new year. Hashem should help the Yidden, and now with Hashem's help, the hostages will be coming home very shortly. So that's wonderful. Anyway, we can learn. This is from the Gemara, the Mishnayos of Sukkos. One can learn this from the machzor of Sukkos. Let's take a look at it right here. One moment. Here, this is the machzor Zichron Shmuel of Sukkos. So part of the machzor, they have the Mishnayos of Sukkos. The Mishnayos of Sukkos. Let's take a look. Mishnayos of Sukkos. So one can learn. So we can learn. Let's see about the Lulav and the Esrog a little bit. Let's take a look. It's always good to learn whatever we learn, the Mishnayos or Gemara. Okay, let's take a look. Lulav hagazul v'hayavesh pasul. A stolen lulav or a dry one is invalid. If it's stolen or it's dried out, it's pasul. Shal ashera v'shal ir hanidachas pasul. One from an ashera or from any city that was led astray is invalid. Ashera is an avodah zarah, shal ashera. One from an ashera, a tree worshipped by idolaters. V'shal ir hanidachas, or from a city that was led astray. The law of the city is outlined in Deuteronomy 13:19. In brief, if the majority of residents in a Jewish city are persuaded by local residents to worship idols, the city and all its inhabitants, the city and all its contents must be burned. The city and all its contents must be burned. Rambam, Hilchos Avodah Zarah 4:2. Pasul is invalid. This invalidation is due to the failure to meet the shear, the halachically prescribed size of the lulav. In the view of the halacha, once an object is condemned to be burned, as are the Asherah and the city led astray, it is considered as if it had already been burned and reduced to ashes. Thus, it lacks the physical dimensions required for the mitzvah. So a lulav hagazul, a lulav like this is not. One can't use it as a lulav for the mitzvah. V'hayavesh, and if it's dried out pasul, shal ashera v'shal ir hanidachas pasul. From an ashera or a city that was led astray is invalid. Niktam rosho, nifritzu olav pasul. If it's the top was broken off of this lulav, the top was broken off, or the leaves severed, it is invalid. Niktam rosho v'nifritzu olav pasul. If the top was broken off, or its leaves were severed, pasul. Nifredu olav kosher. If its leaves nifredu, they spread apart, kosher, it is valid. Okay, so if its leaves spread apart, it's valid. One moment, let's get the right. Yeah, let's get it right. Okay, here. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yogdeno milmola, Shini har habarzel kisherus. Rabbi Yehuda says he should tie them together at the top. They should be tied together at the top. The lulav and everything. The lulav. Well, right now we're talking about the lulav. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Yagdena milmala. He should Rabbi Yehuda said he should tie them together at the top. Sinei har habarzel kesheros. Lulav sheyesh bo shalosha tefachim kedei lenaneh bo kosher. The thorn palms of the iron mountain are valid. So that's a certain kind of lulav, a certain kind of palm. So Sinei habarzel, it's like the Sinei har habarzel kesheros. So it's called the thorn palms of the iron mountain are valid. A lulav that is 3 handbreadths long is long enough to wave is valid. If it's 3 handbreadths long, so it's long enough to wave. We have to wave it. Lulav sheyesh bo shalosha tefachim, or lulav that has 3 tefachim, kedei lenaneh bo, you're able to wave it. So kosher, it's kosher. So beis, let's take a look at what a hadas is. Hadas hagazul v'hayavesh pasul. A stolen myrtle twig or a dry one is invalid. And it's again saying about from Asherah and Ir Hanidachas. Shel Asherah v'shel Ir Hanidachas pasul. One from an Asherah, that's the Avodah Zarah, or a city that was led astray, is invalid. Shel Asherah v'shel Ir Hanidachas pasul. Niktam Rosho nifritzu olav. If it's the top of the hadas was cut off, nifritzu olav, or some of the leaves were torn off, were severed. Oshahayu anavav merubos mi olav. If its top was broken off, or its leaves were severed, or its berries outnumbered its leaves, where the berries outnumbered its leaves, it is invalid. If it had berries on it and it outnumbered the leaves, it is pasul, it is invalid. Nifritzu olav, oshahayu anavav meruvos. It's if the berries outnumber the leaves, pasul, they are. So this is a pasul hadas. V'yim mi'uton kosher, but if he decreases it, mi'uton, it's like ma'at, it means it makes it smaller. If he decreases them, it is valid. If he took off some of the extra berries, v'yim mi'uton, if he takes off some of the extra berries, kosher. So then this is a kosher hadas. V'ein me'ma'atin b'yom tov, but may not decrease them on Yom Tov. One may not decrease the berries on the hadas, the myrtle, on Yom Tov. In other words, if it's a Yom Tov, one can't fix it up anymore. In other words, we should prepare for it before Yom Tov. Arava gezula v'yivesha pesula. A stolen willow twig or a dry one is invalid. That's the willow twig. Arava gezula v'yivesha pesula. A stolen willow twig, or if it's dried up, pesula, it's pasul, it's invalid. Shel Asherah v'shel Ir Hanidachas pesula. Of an Asherah from a city that was led astray is invalid. Niktam Rosha nifritzu aleha v'yatzaf tzofa pesula. If its top was broken off, or its leaves were severed, if the top was broken off, or the leaves were severed, or if it is a tzaf tzofa, it is invalid. Pesula. So if it's the top was cut off, nifritzu aleho, or if the leaves were taken down, were torn off, yatzaf tzofa. If it was a tzaf, it's a possibility to find out what that is. V'yezras Hashem pesula kimosha. One whose leaves are wilted. If the leaves are wilted, Tzaptzuf, it might be it was found floating or something. I think maybe it was found in a puddle of water and was floating, but we can't rely on that. We can, Yezrus Hashem, we'll try to look it up, V'yatzaptzafa pesula kimusha v'shenasheru miktas oleho v'shel baal kishera. A way to look it up is to look it up in the Mishnayos, and in the Mishnayos it goes further into what it means, everything. Like we can look at it, can be looked up, tzaptzafa, what that means. So ones whose leaves are wilted, if it's wilted, or part of its leaves have fallen off, or one from a field is valid. So those are valid. Okay. So kimusha means one whose leaves are wilted. V'shenashru miktas oleho, and part of the leaves have fallen off. Some of the leaves fell off. V'shel baal kishera, or if he got it from a field, shel baal, if it came from a field, kashera, then it is kosher. Dalet. This is the fourth Mishnah. Rabbi Yishmael says, Shalosha hadasim v'shtei arabos. Rabbi Yishmael says, there are 3 hadasim, ushtei arabos, 2 arabos, lulav echod, there's 1 lulav, v'esrog echod, and 1 esrog. Afilu shnayim ketumim, v'echod eno katum, Rabbi Tarfon Omer, there are 3 myrtle twigs, 2 willow twigs, 1 lulav, and 1 esrog are required. Even if 2 are broken off and 1 is not broken off, that's the 3 myrtle twigs. Even if 2 are broken off and 1 is not broken off, Rabbi Tarfon says, even if all 3 are broken off, that it is kosher. That it's kosher. Rabbi Akiva says, just as there is 1 lulav and 1 esrog, so there is 1 myrtle twig and 1 willow twig. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Afilu shloshton ketumim. So Rabbi Tarfon Omer afilu shloshton ketumim. Rabbi Tarfon says even if all 3 are ketumim are cut off. Rabbi Akiva says that it's like all you need is 1 of each. Kishem shalolav echad, just like you have 1 lulav, v'esrog echad, and 1 esrog, ka chadas echad, v'araba achas. So also the same thing. 1 hadas and 1 araba. If we do olive, if its leaves are spread apart, they are fully attached to the spine but are spread apart on top, like the branches of a tree. Okay, so in other words, it's fully attached to the spine, but still they're spread apart, like the branches of a tree. In other words, we're talking about the lulav here. Sinei har barzel, the thorn palms of the Iron Mountain. The spines of these palm branches are very sparsely covered with short leaves. In some branches, the top of the lower leaf does not even reach as far as the beginning of the one above. They are valid only if the top of the one leaf reaches the base of the next one. Gedei l'na'aneyabo, long enough, if it's 3 handbreadths long, one is that it's kosher. Long enough to wave. The lulav must be 3 handbreadths long. The length of the hadas and the arava, that's the length of the hadas and the arava, plus another handbreadth for waving. Thus, in total, the lulav must be at least 4 handbreadths long, while the Hadass and Rava need to be only 3. Thus, in total, the Lulav must be at least 4 handbreadths long, while the Hadass and the Arava need to be only 3. The Hadass, from the scriptural description, Leviticus 23:40 of the Hadass, as Anaf Eitz Avos, twig of a plaited tree, and the Rambam, Lulav 7:2, we derive the requirement that the Hadass be, the Rambam says this, that the Hadass be covered with leaves in a fashion that resembles a plait or braid. The Gemara 32b stipulates that the leaves of the Hadass should grow in clusters of at least 3, either from central points on the twig or from 3 points on one level. Either from central points on the twig or from 3 points on one level. V'hayavesh, or a dry one, see commentary to previous Mishnah. Ravad maintains that the myrtle is dried out only when it turns white. At this stage, the moisture is gone and cannot be restored. Shulchan Aruch 648:7. So when the Ravad says that it's only when it's white, at this stage the moisture is gone and cannot be restored. Shulchan Aruch 648:7 concurs. Niktam Rosho, if its top is broken off. In the case of the Hadass, the commentators are in almost total agreement that the top of the stem is meant. However, the halacha follows Rabbi Tarfon in Mishnah 4, who disagrees. Rav? Nifratu olav, or if it's trees, worse ever. Let's see what Rabbi Tarfon says in Mishnah 4. Rabbi Yishmael Omar Shlosha Hadassim, Ushtei Aravos. Rabbi Yishmael says 3 Hadassim, Ushtei Aravos, 2 Aravos, Lulav Echad, 1 Lulav, V'esrog Echad, and 1 Esrog. Afilo Shnaim Ketumim, V'echad Eino Katum, even if 2 were cut. V'echad Eino Katum, and 1 was not cut. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Afilo Shalosh Ton Ketumim, even if 3 are ketumim, are cut. Niktam Rosho. If it's so, let's see, Niktam Rosho, if its top was broken off. In the case of the Hadass, the commentators are in almost total agreement that the top of the stem is meant. So we're talking about the top of the stem. In other words, we're not talking about the leaves of the Hadass. However, the halacha follows Rabbi Tarfon in Mishnah 4, who disagrees. So in other words, it looks like Rabbi Tarfon says, even if all 3 are cut off, that it is a kosher. Let's see, all 3. There are 3 twigs, 3 twigs, and the top of the stem is cut off, but the top of the leaves cannot be cut off. So Rabbi Tarfon says even if all 3, it's still kosher. It's still a kosher. And Rabbi Akiva Omer Kishem Shalolav Echad V'Esrog Echad Kach Hadas Echad V'Arava Achas. Rabbi Akiva says that just like there's a 1 Lulav and 1 Esrog, so also the same thing applies to 1 Hadas and 1 Arava. But we follow the halacha, the minhag that and the halacha that it's Shalosha Hadassim, 3 Hadassim, Ushtei Aravos, 2 Aravos, Lulav Echad V'Esrog Echad, 1 Lulav and 1 Esrog. That's now Mishnah Hey. Kishem, excuse me. Esrog hagazul v'hayavesh pasul. If an esrog is stolen, or if it is dried out, pasul, it's pasul. One cannot use it. Shalashera v'shalir anidachas pasul. If it's from an ashera, from an avodah zarah, v'shalir anidachas, from a city that was condemned, pasul, it's pasul. Shall arla pasul. One of arla is invalid. We will see if we can find arla. Arla is invalid. Oh, this has to be a tzaptzafa, or if it is a tzaptzafa. This is a mountain plant that resembles the arava, but is a different species. Its stem is white rather than reddish. The stem is white rather than reddish, and its leaves are rounded with serrated edges, unlike the elongated, smooth leaves of the arava. Gemara Rambam Lulav 7:4. Hatzaptzafa. What does it say about Hatzaptzafa? A stolen willow twig or a dry one is invalid. One from an ashera or from a city that was led astray is invalid. If its top was broken off, its leaves were severed. Or if its leaves were severed, or if it's a tzaptzafa, it is invalid. So that's what a tzaptzafa means, tzaptzafa, if it is a tzaptzafa. This is a mountain plant that resembles the arava. Okay, so resembles the arava, but is a different species. Its stem is white rather than reddish, and its leaves are rounded with serrated edges, its leaves are rounded with serrated edges, unlike the elongated smooth leaves of the arava. Gemara Rambam Lulav 7:4. Kemusha, one whose leaves are wilted, no longer fresh but not dried out. Vishinashuru mikta solehu, or part of the leaves have fallen off, but only a minority of them. Vishalbal, or from a field that grew in a rain-watered field, and not near a brook. Rav, the Gemara explains that the phrase Arvei Nachal, willows of the stream, does not exclude willows that grow elsewhere. Vishalbal Kishever, they are kosher. Okay. So the esrog. So now we're talking about the esrog. Since the esrog is the only one of the 4 species that is edible, laws relating to food will apply to it. Some of these laws are among the subjects of our Mishnah. The hayavesh, or dry one, Rava defines the degree of dryness, which invalidates an esrog as the complete lack of moisture. It's completely dry. It's no moisture at all. That's in the Torah, 648. Shall orla, one of orla, for the first 3 years after a tree's planting, the fruit is forbidden for consumption, and no benefit may be derived from it. Leviticus 19:23. Such fruit is called orla, restricted, and it must be burned. So in other words, if this esrog is from orla, it is in the first 3 years after it was planted, so one cannot have any benefit from it. So pasul, it's pasul to be used as a Lulavim and Esrogim, as an esrog. Shal truma tameya, pasul. Shal truma tahora, lo yitol. Lo yitol. You should not use it. V'yim not tell kosher, but if he did use it, it's kosher. It's kosher. Lechatchila, one should not use it, but if it was used, so then it's kosher. Shall truma tameya pasul. One of contaminated truma is invalid. If truma, the tithe given to a Kohen, becomes tamei, contaminated, it must be burned. One of contaminated truma is invalid. If truma, the tithe given to a Kohen, so truma is the tithe, the tithe that's a tenth given to a Kohen. It's a tithe given to a Kohen, to the priest, the Kohen, becomes tamei, contaminated. It must be burned. Thus, such an esrog, as well as the orla esrog, is not considered his property because they are forbidden to him. So, in other words, from truma tameya, if it's truma, it's given to the Kohen. If it's truma tameya, contaminated truma, then it has to be burned. If truma, the tithe given to the Kohen, becomes tamei, contaminated, it must be burned. Thus, such an esrog, as well as the orla esrog, is not considered his property because they are forbidden to him. Shall truma tahora lo yitol. If it is a pure truma, he should not use it. If it is a pure shall truma tahora, if it's tahor, that there's no problem with it, and the Kohen can use it, lo yitol, he should not take it. V'yim natal kosher, but if he did take it, it's kosher, he can use it. If it is a pure truma, in other words, tahor truma, he should not use it. Although an uncontaminated truma esrog is valid according to the halacha, the sages decreed that its use should be avoided in order to avoid the possibility that it might become contaminated. Shel Damai, Beis Shammai Poslin, or Beis Hillel Machshirin. If it is of Damai, Beis Shammai invalidated it, and Beis Hillel validated it. Shel Damai, Beis Hillel Poslin, or Beis Shammai Poslin, or Beis Hillel Machshirin. Of Damai, Beis Shammai invalidates it, and Beis Hillel validates it. Beis Shammai Poslin, Beis Shammai says it's posel, one cannot use it. Beis Hillel Machshirin, Beis Hillel says one can use it. Shel Ma'aser Sheni b'Yerushalayim lo yitol, v'yim natal kosher. If it is a Ma'aser Sheni in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim, he should not use it. But if he used it, it is valid. Shel Damai. So what does Damai mean? If it is of Damai. In the time of Yochanan, the high priest, it was found that many unlearned people were careful to separate truma, but were lax in separating maaser. As a result, so they were very careful to separate truma, but not in separating maaser, a tenth. As a result, the sages decreed that one who buys produce from an am ha'aretz, an unlearned person, must separate maaser from it, even if assured by the seller that he had already done so. This produce is called damai. As a result, the sages decreed that one who buys produce from an am ha'aretz, an unlearned person, must separate maaser from it, even if it's assured by the seller that he had already done so. Thus, this produce is called damai. So damai is produce from an am ha'aretz, an unlearned person. So in other words, they didn't know so much about, they were unlearned. They didn't know about the halacha of separating maaser, a tenth. Truma they did separate, but maaser they were very fastidious to separate. But maaser, a tenth, they did not necessarily separate. So damai, Beis Shammai Poslin. Beis Shammai invalidates it, since the Demai Esrog may not be eaten until it is tithed. It lacks the necessary requirement of lochem, yours. Since it can't be eaten until it is tithed, until a tenth is taken from it, it lacks the necessary requirement of lochem, yours. Rashi, Rav. Ubeis Hillel machshirin. And Beis Hillel validates it. Beis Hillel regards an esrog of demai as yours, because the sages permitted it to the poor for consumption without retithing. Beis Shammai, however, forbid demai even to the poor. Beis Hillel validates it. Beis Hillel regarded an esrog of demai as yours, that belonging to you. It says shalochem. It says lochem of yours. Ulakachtem lochem, you should take of yours. So Beis Hillel validates it. Beis Hillel regarded an esrog of demai as yours, because, in other words, the person is mistaken from his own, because the sages permitted it to the poor for consumption without retithing. Beis Shammai, however, forbid demai even to the poor. Beis Shammai, however, forbid demai even to the poor. Ran. Shall Maser Sheni b'Yerushalayim? If the esrog is of Maser Sheni in Yerushalayim, the esrog, in addition to Maser Rishon, the first tithe, which must be given to the Levi, the Torah requires that the owner to separate Maaser Sheni, the second tithe, which belongs to the owner, but which can be only eaten in Jerusalem. Unlike the Levi's tithe, the Maaser Sheni is holy, and thus, like Truma, may not be contaminated. Therefore, the sages preferred that an esrog of Maaser Sheni, like one of Truma, not be used. So, shall Maaser Sheni be Yerushalayim? If it is of Maaser Sheni in Jerusalem, in addition to Maaser Rishon, the first tithe, which must be given to the Levi, the Torah requires the owner to separate Maaser Sheni, the second tithe, which belongs to the owner but can be eaten. So this belongs to the owner, the Maaser Sheni, but it can only be eaten in Jerusalem. Unlike the Levi's tithe, Maaser Sheni is holy. The Levi's tithe, the Maaser Sheni is holy, and thus, like Truma, may not be contaminated. That's from Leviticus 27:30. Therefore, the sages preferred that an esrog of Maaser Sheni, like one of Truma, not be used. Therefore, the sages preferred that an esrog of Maaser Sheni, like one for Truma, may not be used. They prefer that it not be used. V'yem not al kosher, but if he used it, it is valid. However, outside Jerusalem, where Maaser Sheni fruits may not be eaten, an esrog of Maaser Sheni would not be valid. However, outside Jerusalem, where Maaser Sheni fruits may not be eaten, an esrog of Maaser Sheni would not be valid. So outside of Jerusalem, where Maaser Sheni fruits cannot be eaten, so one cannot eat it, so therefore an esrog of Maaser Sheni would not be valid. Let's see one more. Yezras Hashem. Also chazozis al rubo. If a scab-like boil grew on most of it, this is talking about the esrog. Also chazozis al rubo. If a scab like boil grew on most of it, or if it's pitum, the point was removed, the pitum was removed. Also chazazis al rubo, notla pitmoso, or if it's the pitum was removed, niklaf, or it was peeled, niklaf, it was peeled, nistak, or if it was split, v'choser kolshuhu, and it's missing something, possible, it's invalid. Also chazazit al miyuto, if the boil covered a minority of it, or its stem was removed, or it was punctured, and nothing was missing, it is valid. So if a boil, a slight portion of it, if a boil covered a minority of it, a small portion of it, or its stem was removed, or it was punctured and nothing was missing, it is valid. An Ethiopian esrog is invalid. If one is green as a leek, Rabbi Meir validates it, but Rabbi Yehuda invalidates it. Esrog hakushi posel. An Ethiopian esrog is posel. V'hayorok kikarsi. An Ethiopian esrog is invalid. If one is green as a leek, Rabbi Meir validates it, but Rabbi Yehuda invalidates it. Al rubo, on most of it. If it had a boil-like scab on most of it, only if the boil covers the greater portion of the esrog, is it considered invalid. If a boil covers the greater portion of the esrog, it is considered invalid. An esrog with such a growth lacks beauty. Rosh, it has to be beautiful. Peri eitz hadar, Rosh, Mishnah Brura, the 648:37. The Gemara adds that even a small boil can invalidate the esrog if it is on its chotem, nose, i.e. the part that narrows towards its peak. So the Gemara says that even a small boil can invalidate the esrog if it is on its chotem, that's the nose, the part of that narrows towards its peak. This part of the esrog is more important because any blemish there is immediately visible. Notlot pitmaso, or if its pitum is removed, the short stem that protrudes from the nose of the esrog, the tip of the stem is called shoshanta, bud. An esrog whose top stem pitum had been removed is invalid because it is choser, deficient. Esrogim, however, that grow without a pitum, obviously, are not deficient. Mishnah Brura. If it grows without a pitum, it is not deficient. Okay, so here we have a sample of an esrog. So this is the pitum. And we see that there are no boils, there's no scars, so this would be kosher. And it's a little bit green, but it has yellow. But even if it's all green, it's okay. If it's green, that's the color that it was grown, and it's supposed to be beautiful. It's beautiful. And this is called the shoshanta, this part over here. I think this is the shoshanta we just learned. Let's see, where are we up to? Yeah, over here. And the very top is called the pitum. That's the pitum. And the chotem, that's the nose. That's like where it narrows. Here, where are we up to? Where it narrows to going to the top parts. So this is the the Esrogs. The Esrog, and we have a lulav over there with the Arabos and the Hadassim. Okay, Yeshikayach and Zayt, thank you for learning, and Hashem should help from now on. He always does. Kol Tov, a good thing, a good jar. Pitka Tova. Kol Tov.